Thank you, Shadow. Welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar on PBIS. And before we start, I guess we should do some little introductions. Those of you that were listening to the very beginning before we even started recording, you know that I am the introvert, Shadow's the extrovert. But more importantly, I am a former teacher from Pennsylvania. So I am coming to you from the Northeast. And I work at Classcraft as a customer experience manager. And so I work with all of our schools all across the globe to just make sure that they understand Classcraft, are well trained in Classcraft, and we help and assist them all along the way. Shadow, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am Shadow Lambert. I, too, am a customer experience manager here at Classcraft, and I do much of what Kimber already described. I am a former secondary English teacher, so primarily 9th and 10th graders, or that translates into like 15 to 16-year-olds in the English classroom. And so I am currently in North Carolina, but very soon making the move to New York, hopefully. So I'll be transported somewhere else soon. But I'm so happy to be here with everyone today.
Awesome. Thanks, Shadow. And I'm actually going to jump off the webinar because Anne and I have a lot of catching up. She's in Pennsylvania too. So we're just we're gonna become buds. So it's all you. All right, just kidding. Let's get into it. So what we are going to talk about today is we are going to walk you through a quick overview of PBIS, how you can implement this program within your school. And we are here to talk about how you can use data from Classcraft to personalize your intervention. And we will also take your questions throughout the entire presentation. So feel free, talk to us. We talk to each other all the time, so we are more than happy to hear from you. So please feel free to type into the chat at any time. You can also type into the Q&A as well. But we would love to hear from you, and we would love to hear what your thoughts are on the different things that we talk about throughout this hour together.
Absolutely.
So what schools need PBIS? Well, a lot of schools. Most schools need PBIS. And when you think about PBIS, I want you to think about a school whose referrals are up. The pandemic has hit. Students are coming back to school. They, for some reason, forgot what peopling was like. And now we have to deal with that in school. Now we're trying to teach students how to type, do math, read, understand science, understand why bad things happened in history and how we can stop them from repeating themselves. But we're also trying to teach students how to behave, how to cooperate with one another, how to build a community within the classroom again. So schools that need PBIS are schools that are dealing with these struggles. And that's the majority of schools today, because none of us were immune to COVID. None of us were immune to the pandemic. We all had to deal with it, and we're all dealing with coming out of it and all the craziness that happened during that time. So I want you to think about schools that are trying to keep students in class, trying to keep students in school, trying to keep students focused while also managing all of that behavior. Those are the schools that I want you to think about right now. And I want you to also think about a school that is dealing with all of this while also dealing with teachers that are frustrated, teachers that are burnt out, school staff that are no longer excited to go to work. It's everyone. But those are the schools that I want you to picture. And some of you might be sitting there saying, that's my school, that's our situation. Well, then you're in the right place.
Absolutely. And Kimber, I would argue that every school could use PBIS, because I feel like every single descriptor that you just laid out is happening in every single building or virtual room that we're dealing with education right now, especially post-COVID.
Absolutely. And because every school could use it, let's talk about what we can do. So why are we here? Students are less engaged. They're extremely less motivated. Because of this, everything is suffering. Dropout rates are higher, absences are higher, student violence is higher. I have a friend who's an 8th grade math teacher right down the road from me, and she said the violence in her school, and I know Shadow's heard this a million times, but the violence in her school is worse than when she was teaching adults in the state prison. The violence is worse at the schools, and the struggle with mental and emotional wellness among students and staff is a lot higher. Academic performance is so much lower. So what we need to do is we need to re-engage these students. We need to motivate these students to do school again, to come back to learning, to enjoy it. If we can improve all of those levels, because motivation really is the foundation. If you look at this pyramid, student engagement is the full base. If we can get students re-engaged, get them re-motivated, everything else that piles on that base will improve. So everything else rests on this vital piece of the pyramid. And when students are more engaged, teachers are more engaged. When students like going to school, how could a teacher not enjoy working with those students? Because they're happy to be there. We as teachers, we lose our motivation when we feel like we're not getting through to our students. That's why teachers love aha moments, because it's where we get that spark. We feed off of the aha moments. So we need to get more of those. And that's why PBIS is key to the success of your school and your students. So we need to shift our mindset. We have to go from managing behaviors to, and I hate this word, I hate saying teaching behaviors. And the reason why I hate saying teaching behaviors is mostly because a lot of my friends who are teachers have said, I don't teach students how to behave. That is not my job. And they're right. It's not their job. It is not a teacher's job to teach students how to behave. So what I like to say is that we're not teaching students how to behave. We are just proactively teaching students what the expectations are within the classroom and within the school. So students don't just show up to school and know, I can do this here and I can't do this here. They don't know that already. We do have to teach them that. So we need to teach them the expectations. So what we want to do is we want to encourage those positive behaviors and take away from reacting to negative behaviors. So we want to be more proactive, teaching students what those positive behaviors look like in our school. A lot of times as adults, we tell students, don't do that. Stop that. When instead we should be showing them, I would like you to show up to class on time. So we need to replace the negative with that positive.
Absolutely. I feel like not only does this happen with how we need to try to do this with students, but we need to try to do this with educators too, with the adults that are supposed to be implementing PBIS. Because let's be real right now, a lot of educational institutions are more about documenting the punitive measures and focusing on, okay, we're not going to call home unless it's a bad thing. We're trying to shift the narrative, change the narrative of what happens in this situation. Let's stop being reactionary, as Kimber said, and start being proactive and being able to address the good things. Because if students are being fed and supported positivity and that positive reinforcement and knowing that they're doing well and they're succeeding, we're going to see a shift. Yes, everyone has bad days, and we need to acknowledge those bad days can happen as well. Same for the students as it is for the adults. Modeling it school-wide, having successful PBIS means everybody, everyone everything.
I love that. So here's my lady. You can't talk about PBIS and not bring Rita Pearson into the conversation. She is the spokesperson for everything positive. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, if you have never seen her TED Talk, please watch it. Please type in Rita Pearson, Every Kid Needs a Champion, because she is she's the model for positive behavior reinforcement. And a couple things that really stick out to me whenever Rita Pearson talks and the things that she refers to is she brings in that, yes, every student needs a champion, but looking at that negative, -18 sucks the wind out of you, but +2 says you ain't all that bad. And I love that, because it is true. A lot of times we put minus. You got this wrong. Not, what did you get right? Let's build on that. A lot of times they say, we're supposed to understand what our strengths and our weaknesses are. But they tell us that we should still continue to work on our strengths. Should we work on our weaknesses? Absolutely. But we should continue building our strengths and not ignore them, because your strengths are your strengths. So we should be looking at what students are doing right and build upon that. So PBIS is an evidence-based 3-tiered framework to improve and integrate all of the data, systems, and practices affecting student outcomes every single day. PBIS creates schools where all students are going to succeed. It is a system of teaching behavior skills instead of managing behaviors by celebrating those positives. My favorite Rita Pearson quote, aside from the 18+2, is, we learn from people we like. Teaching is all about building relationships. And I'm not talking be the teacher that gives students cookies and gives them all the sugar and all the sweet treats and, be that person. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking be that teacher that students respect. One that they understand might not be giving them treats and cookies and candy all the time, but is there to help them succeed. Sometimes students will say, the teacher's not mean to me, but she really doesn't care about me either. A student's not going to learn from that.
Absolutely. One thing that I want to remind everyone, and I end up saying this no matter what I'm talking about in terms of webinars, is the students don't expect you to be the superhero. Like, the whole vernacular that we have of I teach, what's your superpower? In my opinion, that's actually kind of toxic, because you're human. You're allowed to be human in front of your students, and your students will respect that. The whole, it's now probably outdated, and kids, my students would call me a loser, but real recognizes real. They're going to respect you for being honest and true, for having your authentic self show up, because then they'll feel comfortable to be their authentic selves, which I think is the keystone of having that positive relationship. Because as we know, relationships are everything. That's why that's Classcraft's motto, because we understand that you cannot have true success without those relationships. And I feel like Rita, rest her soul, was the pillar of an example of how to turn a poor relationship into something that could be used for good. So we all need to try to be like Rita.
Absolutely. I love, Stephen just put into the chat, Parker Palmer, Heart of a Teacher, shows this relationship principle. So if anybody's looking for something to go into beyond today, look that up, dive into it, because relationships really are everything. And that is Classcraft's tagline. That is what we are based on. And for Shadow and I, that is literally our job, to build relationships with our customers, maintain those relationships, and make sure that our customers are happy. And honestly, I don't even like calling them customers, because I feel like I know so much about them and their schools and their teachers that they're more than just a customer, they're people. And so relationships really, really are everything. All right. So the great thing with Classcraft and building PBIS is that you can begin to build relationships with students. And I know some people are probably thinking, wait, how? So I told you to think about these schools where students are really struggling. They don't really want to be there. Referrals are really high. Teachers are really not wanting to be there. But we talked about how when students start to be engaged, teachers start to be engaged. So if you look here at this slide, you can see that we have 2 case studies that Classcraft has done with schools that have used Classcraft and used it consistently, because as Shadow mentioned earlier, consistency is key. And you can see here their quotes. Teachers who consistently use Classcraft also tend to have better relationships with their students. Our administrator at East Paulding said, games, avatars, gears, that's the world that the students live in. And with Classcraft, the administrators and the staff get to live in that world too.
Yes.
Really, Classcraft is a platform for human connection.
Oh gosh, I love that quote so much. It gets me every time.
It's perfect, but it's the truth. So I talked earlier about my friend who's an 8th grade math teacher, and she came from working in a prison teaching inmates. And she came into public school, and I told you her feelings toward the violence that she's seen within her school. But she also shared, when I told her, I want you to use Classcraft with your students. At first she looked at me and she said, I don't know. I really, she was very against it. She did not want to. And when I showed it to her and she saw this really cool background and the cool character avatar that students can get, her exact words were, this is exactly what they're into. They will love this. And she went from being really against it and not sure that her students would even be interested at all to being all in. And she used it and her students love it. And when she falls off and stops using it for a few days because she just gets overwhelmed with everything else, her students remind her, hey, can we do Classcraft again? Can we do one of those boss battles? Can you give me some points? It's building those relationships, because now the teachers and the students are connecting where the students are at. And that's the thing, that's the key. With teachers and with schools, we have to meet the students where they're at. We can't get them to be where we are. It took us years and years to get where we are. So we need to meet them where they are. And Classcraft helps you do that. PBIS helps you do that. So we need to foster a real human connection with students. Here are the benefits of why. I feel like we don't really have to go into this very much because it's pretty obvious. The teacher educator benefits versus the student benefits. When we have a real human connection, students will succeed. They will do better when they feel as though their teachers are advocating for them, that their teachers care about their success. They will try harder. They will have skills that will help prepare them better because they will be paying attention. You will be using PBIS to create that positive environment, and those students will be taking that out into their everyday lives.
Absolutely. It's a real misconception about a school-wide PBIS model that is done well and built with intention and followed with follow through, essentially, that a lot of educators tend to miss the mark and go, oh, well, this is just about the kids. While yes, our goal as educators is to help students, to give them the foundation that we know they need for the real world that is coming, it's also going to benefit the educators. And so we want to make sure that everyone sees that it's not just about the kids. It is also about you. And it's about your health, your mental wellness, your pleasure at work, trying to make sure that you also model it from an educator perspective. The most successful PBIS models that I and Kimber have been able to witness in our role have been where the admins are checking in on the teachers. They're practicing what they preach and then facilitating that. The students are seeing those kinds of relationships, those connections in the hallway and passing, the connection between the teachers and our janitorial staff, who we all know are the backbone of any institution. Then we have that we're showing respect between one another in the office. Even if we're disagreeing, we're doing it respectfully. And so modeling this, facilitating that from the ground up, it benefits everyone, not just the students.
Absolutely. Ugh. Everything you said is just perfect. So I'm just gonna soaking it in.
Thank you.
So we're building these relationships.
Yeah.
But I just need to make sure everybody's still with us. So we're gonna wake you up. We're gonna ask you to do something. And no, it's not Simon Says, and no, don't worry, we're not like asking you to go run a mile. What I'm asking you to do is, I just need you to tell me, I need you to give me a 3, a 2, or a 1 in the chat if you know what MTSS stands for. A 3 means you know, 2 means you kind of know, and 1 means not really. 3, 2, or 1.
Wish I could have had this much participation in my online teaching classes during COVID.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So we have some 3s. We have a 2. We have a 1. This is a nice spread. I like it. We have some people that may have fallen asleep, and I'm really hoping not. But if I made you fall asleep, I don't know what to say because you're asleep. So it's okay. But so MTSS, for those of you that are in my 1s, my 2s, or maybe even my 0s, MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports. So this is where we go into a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 sort of pyramid. And we'll show you what that looks like in the next slide. This is an approach to classroom management that's an opportunity to teach students, not control them, as much as we want to sometimes. But students can only meet behavioral expectations when they know what the expectations are. And positive behavioral interventions and supports will recognize that. So how can we make this happen? So looking here, you see SW-PBIS. This stands for School-Wide PBIS. Let's be real. PBIS within one classroom is only going to do so much. It needs to be school-wide. It needs to be everyone, all hands. Because a student going from Shadow's class to my class, if Shadow does PBIS and I don't, that student's probably going to behave a lot differently in my class than her class. Not to mention when that student goes outside of Shadow's classroom into the hallway, down to the front office, onto the bus, into the cafeteria for lunch, out to the playground, that student's going to be acting a lot differently than whenever they're in Shadow's classroom. So why not take this and make it school-wide so that students see, no matter where they are in the school, the expectations remain the same.
Absolutely.
When you are on the bus, you respect the bus driver. When you are in the front office, you respect the front office secretary. When you're in the lunchroom, you respect the lunch staff. When you're in the classroom, you respect your teacher and your fellow students. All these expectations should be consistent throughout your school. So here you see our multi-tiered system of supports. We have our tier 1, which is all students. It's every single student within your school. No grouping needed. So these are your basic behavior expectations: showing up to class on time, respecting the teacher and other students, respecting school property,
Coming prepared to class.
coming prepared. You took the words right out of my mouth. I love it.
Biggest one for me.
It's like we've done this before.
Oh, yeah.
And tier 2, we take the pyramid gets a little bit smaller. Our tier 2 chunk is no longer all students. This is support for student groups. So some students have a more challenging time with behavior expectations, such as social interactions, low academic engagement. The school can give these students additional support through evidence-based interventions and instruction, such as specific strategies and reinforcements tailored to their particular challenges. So these are your students with 504 plans. We can group those students and provide them with specific supports that are needed.
Absolutely. And one thing to keep in mind is that this does not fully replace the tier 1. This is in addition to. So you have your tier 1, that's everyone in the school. We still expect our student with a tier 2 support to still come to class prepared, to still have their materials, to be respectful, to show up to class on time. But then with tier 2, we're also expecting Millie to work on raising her hand, or trying to stay in her desk, or trying to de-escalate a situation instead of automatically going to anger. And so that's one of those things where it's in addition to, not instead of.
Absolutely. And that's a very good point, Shadow. In addition to, we have our 3rd tier, which is individual students. This is our supports for our IEPs, students with those special behavioral plans that are assigned uniquely to them. I always use the most extreme case if Shadow was a biter.
Never know.
It's extreme. I know it's very extreme. And I especially love it when we use the example for high school, but I worked in high school too, and we had a biter. So it happens. So, but these are tier 3 behaviors are unique to individual students. So our 3rd tier is the most intensive. It's for students who need the individualized support and services because of their ongoing behavioral incidences. So in addition to showing up to class on time, being respectful, also, maybe they have the tier 2 where they have to raise their hand and they need all of those behaviors, but then they also have the very unique, don't bite anybody today, Shadow. So, and that is how we go from our tier 1 to our tier 2 to our tier 3. And like Shadow said, it is in addition to as you go up, but a student can have tier 1 and tier 3 supports needed, or they can have tier 1, 2, and 3. It's all based on your student and what their needs are and where they fit into the categories. But this is how teachers, educators, administrators can make better decisions about students. And we can help really track that student data.
And this is what's so beautiful about School-Wide PBIS or MTSS, however you want to phrase it, is that it can be so beautifully fine-tuned for every student, every challenge, every goal. And being able to truly say, with that data that Kimber's referring to, with that documentation that we as educators know we have to have, we can say, yes, we are supporting the fact that we're trying to encourage Shadow to do well in all of her classes, meet all of the regular educational demands of a student, but we're also trying to award her for not biting her classmates. It's a problem, but I'm getting awarded every day.
You know, some days are harder than others.
True that.
But Shadow brings up a very, very good point. We're bringing all of this together. We have the consistent implementation. We need to make sure that we have the right systems in place. We need to make sure that we are practicing it, and that students have the support. And we need to make sure that we are using accurate, relevant data to support our decision making. All of these things, all these three pieces are the core components of school-wide PBIS. They are needed in order to be successful. I always use consistent implementation as a key piece because consistency is key. If Shadow, I always, going back to the example of Shadow using it in her classroom, me being in another classroom, not using it, it's inconsistent. In order for it to be successful, it must be consistent. And I always go back to the golden rule that we were taught as kids, we as teachers teach our students, but a lot of times we as adults tend to forget. You get out of it what you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you put in inconsistency and little effort, you will get back little results and inconsistent results.
Yes, absolutely. And that's something we definitely have to think about when trying to put in a school-wide program, is that it takes everybody. Reading on some of the most recent data regarding PBIS, I can't tell you how many times in various wordings, of course, but it was all talking about this is school-wide. It's not just up to Ms. Parrish and Ms. Lambert. It's not just up to us and then 4 other teachers. If you want to see the true transformative results of a kind of system like MTSS PBIS, you have to have it across the board. And I'm going to just say, from speaking from Kimber and I in our role here at Classcraft, we have so many schools that come in and go, we're just trying to synthesize what everyone's doing. We're trying to bring in, because every teacher has something different. Some things are working, some things are not. But at the end of the day, we cannot generate the data we need because we're all over the place. Coming to an agreement, setting up the expectations, because students thrive on structure. Even those of them that act like they don't, we all know, whether your parents, big sisters, big brothers, grandparents, whatever your situation may be, you know, you can think of a child in your head that does better with structure. And that's what with school-wide PBIS or MTSS, you're doing that for that consistency, to provide that support, to make informed decisions. All of that requires structure, and then further creates the structure that we need to meet the needs of all learners.
Absolutely. Now I want to take that pyramid that we were looking at a couple slides ago, and I want you to picture it like a cone. And now put the tip up to your eye. And that's what we're looking at right now. Like, we're looking through the cone. The tip where you have your eye is that 5%. That's our tier 3 students. It's very small. It's most likely about 5% of your population. Now, I do know some schools, they will tell you, based on the type of school that they are, they might be 100% is in the tier 3 category. So each school is a little bit different. But in a standard K through 12 setup, you would have 5%-ish of your students would be in that tier 3. Then as we go down the cone, it gets a little bit bigger, and we have that 15% ring. So it's just a few more students. Sometimes the pyramid can be a little deceiving. Sometimes people think like, oh, well, that's still a really big group of students in the tier 2. But I like this view of it better because it takes it down and kind of shows you it's smaller groups than what we realize. Tier 2 is typically about 15%, 12 to 15% of your student population, and then everybody else. And like Shadow said, all those tier 1 behaviors are for everyone. So that's why our tier 3 is in the middle. So I just like this view. It's a little bit different, but it just helps to break it down a little bit better.
I love you doing those teacher skills of showing multiple visuals. That way everyone truly understands.
I try to work it in somewhere.
Respect it.
So, Shadow, if we are going to put PBIS into a checklist,
Yes.
we have to first define what we want from our PBIS program.
Yes.
So when we work with schools, we have to come up with clear objectives. As teachers, we have to create lesson plans that have objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Why should this be any different? Why should a program that we plan to implement school-wide not follow the same process as a lesson that we plan to teach to our students?
Mm-hmm. It's like the planning backwards. Think about, what do you want your end goal to be? Do you just want students to behave? I keep on thinking about TikTok right when I went back into the classroom full time after quarantine. I just wanted my students not to destroy every soap dispenser in the building for the first month of school. Like, just don't destroy everything. But then things change. And so you always have the time to be able to fluctuate, but you have to think, am I focused on motivation? Am I focused on academic improvement? Am I going to focus on behavior? Am I about building relationships and improving our school culture? Think about what you want to do and what your core goal is. You can have all these little sub goals, but you want to think, what is my main objective when trying to set up an effective, consistent program?
Absolutely. And not only do we need to understand and define what it is, but we also need to make sure that we're providing the teachers and the staff with the appropriate strategies to address these behavior challenges that we are expecting them to handle. Once we define what it looks like and what we want it to do and the results that we want in the end, we need to create a team. This cannot fall on one person's shoulders. When it does, it fails. Why? Because one person can't take on the burden of an entire school or an entire district by themselves. They are not going to be able to get around to monitor to make sure that everyone is getting what they need, being fully supported, and making sure that everything is consistent. They cannot spread themselves out that much. So we need to make sure that we get a team together, create a team that represents the different aspects of your school. This allows you to get a clearer view of what supports are needed, because you need to make sure you have teachers, obviously, but what about a counselor? What about a social worker?
Mm-hmm.
What about your speech therapist, your reading specialist,
Absolutely.
your librarian? Get your specials teachers involved. Oftentimes, some of these individuals get left out.
Mm-hmm.
Sign language interpreters. We need those specialists within the school that are working with specific populations of the students to also be represented. And you need to make sure that you also check in with your students, especially in your middle school and high school levels. A lot of schools have student council. Check in. See what they're saying, see what their thoughts are. Maybe they have ideas about behaviors that will make safe school communities and ideas that motivate them. But you need a team. It takes a village. The next thing is you need to make sure you ensure those consistent behavioral goals. Shadow has harped on this for the last 13 slides. So if you haven't gotten this one yet, here it is again. Consistency is clear. Oftentimes teachers make their own goals and reinforce their own behaviors, but we need to make sure that we have consistent expectations across the school so the students don't get confused. I don't want a student going to Shadow's class cursing out the wazoo, then coming to my class, forgetting that, oh, this is Ms. Parrish's class and we can't curse here. No, consistent expectations across the school.
Yeah.
And consistently reinforcing these.
And this is where I kind of blend bullet 2 and bullet 3 together, in the sense that it doesn't necessarily have to always be your school improvement team that's your PBIS team. It would be fantastic if there were overlap, to where they could all collaborate in creating those behavior goals for a school. And we see, both from a personal perspective and talking with our educator friends and family, and as Classcraft customer experience managers, the schools that have the most success and the feeling of this is working, one of the key factors, other than consistency, is pulling in the opinions of others. So as Kimber was telling you, to pull in those specials teachers, pulling in those outside resource adults, the counselor, all of those things, give them a voice and a say in what behaviors and what goals we're going to set as a school. Now, some schools, they already have a PBIS matrix. Oftentimes it's something very cute, like ROAR or Pride, whatever the situation may be. But if not, this would be a great time to pull school representatives, like your student body, going into your teachers. For example, Kimber and I talk about this all the time. We've had some schools that do not put arriving to class on time as one of their school-wide behaviors. And then when we go to look at their data, we've got arriving to school on time, verbalized or written in 27 different ways in the data, because 27 different teachers put that as one of their classroom goals. And then it just made it was just chaos to try to really look at definitive data. But if that principal had polled his teachers, here we could have put that in consistently. Okay. So ensure those behavior goals.
So you are 100% right. And I'm going to go through the next couple bullets just because they all just kind of pull in together, but celebrate the small wins, intrinsically motivate your students. Do not just throw them candy and say, here's your quick reward. We need to make sure that we are celebrating the little things that students do, not just the monumental things. I always tell teachers, Classcraft is not for, oh, I'm going to give students points because they saved a kitten out of a tree. No, we're not asking them to do that. We're celebrating the small stuff. We're celebrating the fact that they showed up on time to class. We're celebrating the fact that they are here and they remembered their homework. We're celebrating the small stuff. And when students feel like everything matters, it's no longer, oh, well, that's no big deal. It's just a small thing. Everything's a piece of it. And we need to make sure that we are bringing in the intrinsic motivation theory. We need to make sure that we are making students want to do the right thing, that we are giving them reasons and options. If you're a Classcraft user, then you're familiar with our process where students get their points and they can unlock real life privileges. They can unlock different rewards throughout Classcraft, cool gear for their character, backgrounds, new privileges, different things that they can do. And so the students are motivated to continue going. They want to get more because they want to unlock the next thing. But also, as Shadow mentioned earlier, use the data, use it as a tool. It is critical to especially your tier 2 and tier 3 students, because you can put in specific data related to them. If you have a check-in, check-out system at your school, Classcraft can just replace it. Because traditional paper-based PBIS implementations often provide little in the way of data. That's why oftentimes they don't work for very long, because you don't know why a student got that paper buck. At my friend's school, the students, the the school was using a sticker system. Instead of bucks, students got stickers. They could turn in the stickers to purchase something out of the school store. But the students started buying the stickers off Amazon because they realized that's where the teachers were buying them. So they just bought their own. And then the students were selling them to each other. Their sticker PBIS program went out the window faster than they even brought it in because the students just were quick. Students can't clone Classcraft. They can't make their own. They can't hack the system. Well, hopefully not. We don't think they can hack the system, but this is a system that works because not only can the students not replicate it on their own, they can't steal your bucks, they can't go buy stickers, but you also get actual data, timestamp data to reflect the student's behavior in real time, which is really awesome. Now, we mentioned a few of the challenges being the fact that paper systems, you don't really have the data and students can sometimes easily replicate it, but it's also very time consuming. Staff is trying to figure out where they can get this and where to find this and how to do this. It can be very time consuming. So you want to try to keep away from extra work for your teachers. That's why we love Classcraft, because yes, teachers are giving out students points for arriving to class on time, but it's at the same time they're taking the attendance. Teachers can use Classcraft tools like the volume meter or the timer to keep students on task, to save their voice, because I don't know how many times I told students to keep their voices down during class. And then I could stop doing it when I just turned on the volume meter. Students could see. I didn't have to say anything. It was projected right up on the front board. I could also add a timer to it so students knew exactly how long they needed to be that quiet. It was up the entire class period. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we serve as a centralized way and as kind of a place to handle everything we need to do in terms of classroom management, monitoring, increasing the student buy-in, saving us time when we can. It just makes it so much easier. It truly, no pun intended, is a game changer.
A few of the other pieces, it's consistency.
Just keep on. It's consistent if you use it the way you're supposed to.
Yeah, but that's like one of the biggest challenges with PBIS is being consistent across all your teachers, being consistent across the school, being consistent every day, making sure that you're doing it. And sometimes those paper bucks, one of the schools that we mentioned earlier in today's presentation with the quotes about teacher relationships and how Classcraft helped with that, they were using a paper buck system and it worked for a year, but then the students didn't care. The students didn't like it. They didn't care for it. So then they got Classcraft and it was night and day for them. The students really bought in. So that can be a big challenge with your PBIS platform. Are students going to buy into it? Are they going to be interested? So how can we help? Well, first off, we're not a paper system. That's the big thing. The other big thing is that we can help give students autonomy. So you can see here on this slide that there are some words. Students can take a break. Student gets an extra hour to turn in an assignment. Student can have a 10-minute video meeting with the teacher. These are what are referenced to in Classcraft as powers. Students earn their points based on their expected behaviors. So teachers giving them points for how they're behaving, whether it's showing up on time, keeping their voices down, being respectful of one another, whatever it may be, completing assignments, they get those points and those points go towards them unlocking privileges, such as these powers. Teachers can customize these powers to be what they want, what works. If you're a science teacher and you have labs, you can make a power for students to be able to choose their lab partner. But students have the autonomy now to choose when they want to use a power, pending teacher approval, as well as what power they want to have. What privilege are they motivated by? Maybe they don't care about a 10-minute meeting with the teacher. Maybe they don't really care about taking a break from classwork because they like it, but maybe they need an extra hour for an assignment.
Oh, yeah.
So that student can choose which privilege they want to have. Classcraft also helps with student competency, because as Shadow showed, powers equal privileges. Well, points and levels and crystals all lead to those powers and privileges. Students get points that help them level up as students throughout the year. Students don't feel like this is one more thing for them. Students are excited. They're motivated. They want to level up. They want to see how high they can get their character. Even us adults, we use Classcraft. And we love seeing who's at what level and seeing, how did you get that? How did you do that? We love it. Go ahead, Shadow.
Sorry, I just get so excited. This refers back to where Kimber was talking about celebrating the small teacher wins too. This is doing that for the students as well. So acknowledging like, hey, Malika, you leveled up from 4 to 7 this week. That's fantastic. That's great. Good job. And so you're able to acknowledge those small wins, those little everyday successes that maybe aren't tied to grades. Because some students, they are the sweetest, best behaved student who deserves great acknowledgement, but they may just be a student who is an average C student. They may never get that A, but you know what? They're going to get their XP because they're going to do what's expected of them. They're going to be respectful. They're going to be helpful to their classmates, and we can honor them this way.
Absolutely. And the big thing is, how can we make this go from good to great? How can we go from an okay program to something that's really awesome? And the biggest thing is that it needs to be supported. PBIS implementations often neglect the issue of student engagement. We're missing an opportunity. And that's why we at Classcraft love working with schools to bring them our PBIS platform, because we get students engaged. It was built to engage students and create a sense of community. It puts students at the heart. Students are getting points. They are getting promotions. They are getting powers. And they're doing this all together. We're giving them the competency, the autonomy, the relationships that they need. It is a culturally relevant way to fulfill the needs for competency, autonomy, and relationships that intrinsically motivate students to practice their behavior skills. This is their culture. We are not a video game. We are not having students play video games in class. It is not here to distract students. It is just here to engage them and motivate them.
Mm-hmm. So absolutely, as Kimber said, we look like a game. We are the dashboard of showing and keeping track of the progress of real life being the game. So school is the game, meeting expectations, and then you award the points for their character. It's fully customizable, as Kimber alluded to earlier, with, our 2 little examples of shapes of our tiered systems. And it's collaborative. We're allowed to build that student-teacher relationship to collaborate, student-to-student collaboration, whereas other places and other programs don't necessarily focus on the collaborative power of students. And so with this, we're able to really, and Kimber and I could gush about Classcraft all day, obviously, but it's just a comprehensive way that checks so many boxes and makes it so easy to literally hit all of these expectations of what we as educators are trying to do when we're trying to develop and teach the whole student. It's not just about academics, especially now. It's about the student in teaching them everything: how to survive, how to maintain, how to become successful.
Absolutely. And I changed the slide here because you were talking about students collaborating and students cheering each other on, and kudos is a really great system for that, so that students can support one another. Just rehashing this one, not really talking about it, just rehashing it. We have to have all three to make it from good to great. We talked about the data. Here's the data. You get real-time data in Classcraft on student engagement, your school climate. You are able to see how students are doing, how positive the school is in real-time data, and data is just getting better. Our developers are constantly working to make the data within Classcraft better based on the feedback of those that have been using it for years. And it's amazing. And using this data, you can see the one school that we referred to earlier in today's presentation. They were able to break through their PBIS plateau because they were using Rater bucks and it didn't work. And now they finally, with Classcraft, they decreased referrals by 85% in just one term. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And the other school, Broadview, after implementing Classcraft into their PBIS strategies, they were able to get teacher buy-in with a comprehensive onboarding process that was able to quickly create, access, and track student behavior data to highlight and celebrate students. They lowered referrals by 33% and cut down work time on behavior by 80%, which is huge. Because we talked at the beginning, we don't want teachers having to teach behavior. That is not what you're supposed to do. But they do have to make sure that they're showing their expectations, but they no longer have to spend as much time on behavior when you have a good PBIS platform. So those are just a few case studies, but we're going to end on that note. Shadow, is there anything else that you would like to say to wrap up?
Consistency.
I was waiting for it. I knew it.
No, but we thank you for your time today. We know that as educators, you have a ton of work on your plate and wear many, many hats, but thank you so much for what you do for your students, regardless of their age, your coworkers, regardless of their age, and what you do for your communities, because we truly, truly couldn't see society succeed without you. And so thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time and thank you for all that you do. Shadow said it all, so I'm just going to summarize right there. But thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at a future Classcraft webinar or maybe at a future event. And Anne, if you're going to the Pete and C conference in Pennsylvania next month, look me up. I'll be there.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.